Good job, Suicide Squad. You got a song from the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack and you put it in your movie. Does it count that Spirit in the Sky was in the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack but wasn't in the movie, but Suicide Squad put it in their movie? Does that consider it as copying? Okay, so Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad continues from the events of Batman v Superman as it follows the story of a government agent named Amanda Waller, and motivated by the event of the world first seeing Superman, she begins to prepare if another said Superman were to again come to planet Earth. She talks about how this Superman shares the same human values and wants to protect the human race, but she was like, what if a being just as powerful as Superman were to come down to planet Earth and was a complete asshole? This idea basically leads to her building a team filled with villains with certain abilities so they can prepare for that event. And of course, an event happens so she can finally use this team. As the Suicide Squad are given orders to take out an imminent threat with a bribe of their freedom, little does Amanda Waller know that there are some members of the team that have plans of their own. Now, Suicide Squad is now considered the third film of the DC Extended Universe. I mean, some may consider it as a second because Batman v Superman was kind of the one to really extend the DC Universe, but I consider it as the third film because of Man of Steel first introducing Superman, and then he had to play a part in Batman v Superman, so yeah. However, this is the first film that's not directed by Zack Snyder. This one's directed by David Ayer, the director of such films like Fury and End of Watch, and I was really excited on what he can bring to the DC Universe. He has a very interesting style of directing that looks very promising for a movie like Suicide Squad, and ever since the trailers came out, I had a feeling that this was gonna be the one that's gonna stand out from all the DC films. And admittedly, it definitely is a standout, but unfortunately, this really saddens me to say this. This movie was just okay. But of course, I'll start with some of the things that I liked, and that is easily the onslaught of characters that this movie provides us without them shoving them down our throats. I mean, as I fear that this movie would probably do. The movie has all these villains, of course, but a part of us was wondering, okay, how are they gonna flesh out these characters, and how are they gonna make you care about them as the movie progresses? Now, a good majority of them have some pretty interesting backstories, like Deadshot played by Will Smith, Harley Quinn played by Margot Robbie, and Rick Flag played by Joel Kinnaman. These characters are basically the front runners of this film, and they're the ones that are being fleshed out the most, which was cool because out of this team that's just full of crazy ass people, it expressed a form of humanity to them. And the same thing goes for the other characters. You don't just look at them as villains, but more of like damaged human beings who have problems of their own. I really liked how they handled these characters such as Deadshot and Harley Quinn, but compared to these other characters, it was done a little bit better because the rest of them were told in a pretty choppy way, but Deadshot, Harley Quinn, they were the ones that you cared about the most. And the style was really interesting in Suicide Squad. David Ayer gave us this vibe of a fun, witty action film that was crazy just like these characters are. Whenever these characters are first introduced, they would have these specific introductions that really express how their thought process is and who they really are as a character. I mean, whoever did these designs, good job. They were really awesome. Now, as for the rest of the film, I gotta be honest here, it felt like one rush film to get to the final action sequence. It was like this. They first introduced the characters and then all of a sudden, boom, here's the big beam in the sky. Because there wasn't really too much build up as to what the villain was doing. It just sort of happens, and the movie just expects you to understand the villain's motivations. How this movie is structured from the characters and events leading into the action scenes, it all translates to some pretty bad storytelling and pacing. It was pretty messy. First they would introduce some characters, and then they will get into a couple action scenes, and then they will have a sit down to give more character background on a certain character, and it just didn't flow too well on what was happening in the movie. But when they do have characters with interesting backgrounds, like Katana in the film, they utilize them very rarely, and you're left wanting more of them. It was hard to get behind some of these characters that rarely have any screen time, which a lot of it had to do with the script. Ultimately, it was all over the place. It wasn't like I absolutely hated on what they were trying to do with the Suicide Squad, but I just wish that there was a little bit more coherence in the story and better flow of some characters. Now, despite how fun the action could be, I mean, which honestly I had a really fun time with, but there's no denying that the action is handled extremely poorly on almost every aspect of how action should be executed. It was like someone from the editing room didn't know how to edit action. It seemed like they were too busy on making the character introductions look cool, where they completely forgot on that part of the film. I'm almost sure it was a studio thing because of the reshoots they had earlier this year, which surprisingly enough, it was influenced because of the enormous amounts of hate of Batman v Superman, which in the end became textbook example on why you should stick to your guts on how your film should be without people sticking their hands in there and messing it up entirely. I also hinted at on how I really didn't like this villain because of the lack of motivation and how everything just happens, making you care about said villain, which is absolutely true. I mean, this really isn't much of a spoiler, but the Joker played by Jared Leto, he wasn't the main villain. He was just there, honestly. It harkens back to how some of these characters are underutilized, definitely, and the Joker is absolutely one of them. He maybe had like 7 minutes of the entire film. This movie hyped him up to be like the next Heath Ledger. I mean, it seemed like the set were frightened to be near him, and they actually got a psychiatrist to come on set and calm him down. Sounds like a very promising character for the movie, right? But in the end, you just wish that it simplifies itself down to the villain like the Joker rather than the villain that you get in the movie. However, like I said before, there's absolutely no denying that this film is fun, but you also have to look at some things like character arcs, storytelling, the editing, stuff that makes film at face value. Overall, Suicide Squad was just an okay experience for me because I say if you want to see Suicide Squad, it's best to wait for the Redbox release. However, great soundtrack though. I might buy that on iTunes. Okay guys, have you seen Suicide Squad and what did you think about it? And what is currently your favorite DC Extended Universe movie? Whatever it is, leave it down below. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all that social media shit down below. Keep in contact with me. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And as always, may the Force be with you.